All right. So I had written out this huge response, and I accidentally pressed refresh and lost all my tweets. So I decided instead to just turn on the camera and put out a response. So for those of you who have been following this debate is between myself, Javad Hashmi, and Abdullah Gondal. So I am a Muslim academic. I'm a PhD candidate at Harvard University in Islamic studies. And Abdullah Gondal is an ex-Muslim who, honestly, in my opinion, slips into what we can call Islamophobia. I don't like using that term a lot because it can close doors. Just using a label like that can shut off conversation. And I am interested in having a dialogue, respectful and civil dialogue with Abdullah Gondal. And he's a nice enough guy. I like him as a person. After this back and forth, I think I lost a little bit of respect for him in the sense of I felt that he should have been a little bit more honest in the way we had this conversation. I think he's being a little disingenuous, and I'll tell you why I think that is. But nonetheless, let's keep this more or less civil. So let's talk about how this debate kind of started, recap just a little bit, and then I'm going to deal with his latest response where I feel that he's being a little bit disingenuous. So this is the initial thread that started it. He basically compared, the Prophet to Hitler. This is where I say to him that, I don't like using the word Islamophobe too much, but if not you, then who is Islamophobic? Because previously you had compared ISIS, and you had kind of equated ISIS or Islam is how you had phrased it. So you compared it Islam to ISIS, and then here you're doing it to Nazism. Again, if you compared Judaism to Nazism, I think you would rightfully be called an anti-Semite. So I think this is problematic, but you know what? I don't want to get hung up on such labels and just end the conversation there. I actually want to deal with the substance of your arguments. All right. So he basically, as the evidence, he just kind of put these two quotes side by side. The first quote is from Hitler, or about Hitler at least. And then the second one is from the Prophet Muhammad, in which he says, supposedly, I will expel the Jews and Christians from the Arabian Peninsula and will not leave any but a Muslim. And so then he just gave some, screenshot evidence of this, which is this right here, which is in Sahih Muslim, this hadith. Okay, so basically my response was right here. And I argued that we can approach this in one of two ways. The first way, we could approach this as secular scholars. And the second way is, okay, if you're going to insist on the traditionalist paradigm, then we can go down that route as well. The inconsistency that I pointed out to in Gondal's approach, which I've noticed this about a lot of, kind of people on the anti-Islam, anti-Muslim side, is that they are hyper skeptical and use the critical approach when it comes to the Quran. And so they draw upon modern Quranic studies when it comes to the Quran. And Gondal himself has videos where he does this. But then when it comes to the Hadith and the Sirah literature, then all of a sudden they use kind of a dogmatic, gullible approach, and then they're hyper-traditionalist when it comes to that. And so this is kind of an inconsistency. So look, if you're going to use the secular method, then you should be consistent. The secular method does consider the Quran to be the earliest extant source that can tell us about the prophets. Now, of course, recent Quranic studies scholarship has poked kind of holes in a purely traditionalist narrative when it comes to the Quranic compilation. And this has caused certain controversies. But if you're going to take that route, that's fine. I do take that route, and I'm okay with what modern Quranic studies tells us about the Quran. I'm very comfortable with that. But if you're going to accept that route, then you should also take the critical approach to Hadith, in which my claim, which I think we can easily back up, is that experts in Hadith studies, purely secular scholarship, would be cautious about taking any single report and back projecting it to the Prophet. this not only includes kind of the earlier scholars, but it includes the pushback that was even given by Motsky, and there's going to be a thread that'll come out shortly on that too. But the point is that if you're going to be skeptical and critical about one of them, you should be skeptical and critical about the other, and there's even more reason to be about the Hadith and the Sirah literature. Now, again, this is if you're taking the secular approach. If you're taking the traditionalist approach, we'll get to that, and I want to do justice to that perspective as well. So here, I basically point out to Abdullah Gondal that, look, if you're going to mention this report about, and he kind of used it in a mocking way, right? He said that what nonsensical excuse is going to be brought up by Muslim apologists this time? Well, really, if we take a secular approach, we don't have to take any nonsensical argument, but instead we can simply take what the scholars say. And here I referred to an article by Harry Munt that was published in 2014. So that's right over here. And you can review what I tweeted out, and you can review what the article says. But basically that article casts serious doubt about whether any such widespread action actually took place, certainly not in the decades immediately following Muhammad's death. And the report itself is kind of back projected on to the first caliph, the second caliph Umar, and from there to the Prophet Muhammad. Now, it might actually be the Umar II where this report originated from, but Munt points out that, and I agree, that it's probably even back projected onto Umar II. So let alone to the Prophet or the second Caliph Umar, it's probably not even to Umar II. So you can look at that article if you want. Now, then that was the bulk of my argument. That's the perspective that I take. But if you're going to take a traditionalist approach, then I argue you should do justice to the traditionalist approach, which would not use this hadith to actively call for expelling Jews and Christians. Really, you might have a handful of people who would say something like that, but really it's just about ritual, keeping the environs of Mecca and Medina. That's so you have those signs, Muslims, non-Muslims, but not about actively expelling anyone. Anyways, so that was my response. And I kind of took Gondal to task for not even being familiar with the literature on what he was quoting. Now, Gondal then, this is the response that now I'm making the video for. This is the thread. So basically, he says that this hadith that we're talking about is mutawatir. Now, he does misspell it, and he does that frequently. It's kind of petty to comment on his spelling, but the problem is that I don't think he knows what mutawatir means. It's kind of abundantly clear from this that he doesn't know. It seems that he thinks mutawatir means that just a bunch of reports that kind of say the same thing. And so then that's all this is. It's just a bunch of reports that kind of mention somebody getting expelled. That's not what mutawatir means. And I'm not sure Gondal knows that. And if he knows that, then it's even worse, because then he's kind of engaging in academic, it's deceit a little bit, because he knows that his audience doesn't know this. And so he's trying to make this kind of big claim here. But the reason why it's moving the goalposts and dishonest to begin with is the fact that the claim that a hadith is mutawatir does not mean anything for the argument that I raised, which was based on secular scholarship. So you should know that for secular scholars of hadith, just the fact that a hadith is mutawatir does not mean that it is reliably going back to the Prophet. In fact, Yunbal wrote a book chapter on this very topic, in which he took a hadith that's supposedly one of the most well-known of the mutawatir hadiths, which are just a handful, and shows that, in fact, it does not really go back to the Prophet. And you can look at his book chapter if you'd like on that. So the question I have is, why is Gondal even mentioning mutawatir here? It's completely irrelevant to my arguments. So this is where I think he's not being an honest interlocutor here. And I wish he would be, because my argument has nothing to do with this. But what makes this even worse for Gondal is the fact that it's not only irrelevant, it's completely false. So he tries to back up this claim. So even though it's not important to me whether it's mutawatir or not, if that was important, it still doesn't matter, because he doesn't back that claim up. So he's already confused when he says this narration has 4 variations, and then he mentions these, that's already a dubious claim, because really these are just different hadiths. So he's confused in his thinking. Really, what we need to look at is one hadith and see if that hadith is mutawatir or not. And the way we know that is if it's mass. So mutawatir, for those of you who don't know, it means that a report is mass transmitted. And it has to be mass transmitted on every level of the chain. So even if you had 10 million hadiths, if they go back to the same follower, and from that follower, it's single-stranded hadith back to the Prophet, that does not give you enough proof to say that it's mutawatir. So this is well known. This is just a classical understanding of mutawatir. And so, this is very confused thinking on his part. Now, what makes things worse for him is that, well, before we get to that, this part right here, we should know, it was narrated years apart by different companions. This is question begging. You have to prove this. You can't just state this. That's what we're asking about. So that's just, very weak argumentation on his part. So now he's going to just basically, dump all of these reports, and he's basically trying to impress his followers because they don't know anything really. So, yeah, how could you deny all of these reports? That's kind of what his argument is. But he's based his entire claim on the fact that this is mutawatir, and we're going to show that this is not the case. So let's look at the second slide. So I'm glad that he kind of numbered his slides. So the problem with the second hadith that he brings up, this is a broken chain, right? This is a broken chain. You cannot use a broken chain as proof for a claim of something being mutawatir. This is just basic stuff. So why is he even bringing this hadith up? It's a broken chain, right? So, and the funny thing is that he says that this is from Imam Malik with a very short chain. You mean a broken chain, right, Gondal? So this is a funny claim to make. And it indicates to me that he doesn't know what mutawatir means. This chain is missing at least one link, if not 2. So this hadith is already thrown out of the discussion. It cannot be used. This report cannot be used to make claims of mutawatir. All right. The same thing with this third hadith. This is, it's at least mursal, if not munqati. It's broken. So this is again thrown out. So 2 and 3 are both useless to his argument. So I don't know why he's bringing this up. Then we can go to slide 4. Slide 4, why are you even bringing this up? Slide 4 is a completely different hadith. Same thing with slide 5. So slide 4 and slide 5 are completely different hadith. You cannot bring up a completely different hadith to claim that the hadith you are talking about is mutawatir. So this is just confused thinking on his part. And it should kind of strike you as interesting that this hadith talks about not the Jews and the Christians. That was the hadith we were talking about, but it actually uses the polytheists here. Now, Gondal is trying to use this or to claim that, yeah, look, this all goes along with the same kind of thing. But if you're a secular scholar, really this fact that now all of a sudden you have a different context, you have a different group that's being supposedly expelled, and you have formulaic language being used, that should actually alert you to the fact that you should be very suspicious that this is kind of a topa, this is a trope that's being used, and you should be suspicious. This should actually make you more critical of such sort of reports. But the bottom line is that neither 4 or 5 can be used to reinforce his main claim here, which is that it's mutawatir. So 4 and 5 are also thrown out. So this is not going so well for Gondal, and the fact that it uses polytheists actually works against him, not for him. All right. Slide 6 is would have been a useful hadith for him, except that slide 6, it's mursal. That's actually not even a saying. Sorry, it's not even a saying of the Prophet. It's a saying of Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second caliph. So we have Umar saying that if I live, I shall certainly expel the Jews and Christians from the Arabian Peninsula. this hadith, this report doesn't even go back to the Prophet. So this works against you. It cannot be used in a claim of mutawatirness. And worse yet, this actually shows what I was talking about in my initial response to you, which is that you see the process of back projection going on. So initially, the idea was that if the Prophet had lived long enough, he would have expelled the Jews and the Christians. And that's why later the first caliph needs to do it, or Umar II needs to do it. This actually shows the back projection process, where now it's supposedly Umar ibn al-Khattab who, if he had lived long enough. So you're seeing how these reports are being back projected. So this actually, again, works against Gondal. So far, we've gone down 6 slides. Not a single slide can be used to back his claim about the mutawatirness of that initial hadith that we are debating. Now we go to slide number 7. What we see in slide number 7 is the back projection process taking place. So in slide 6, we had the report going to Umar. Now we have it all of a sudden going back to the Prophet. This is working against you, my friend Gondal. And anyways, now we could ask about this hadith. Yes, this hadith has been graded as sahih, but the question of just because a hadith is sahih does not mean it is mutawatir, right? The claim is about mutawatirness, not about whether it's sahih or not. So we now need to know, is this hadith mutawatir? I'm not contesting that there are certain hadiths which are considered sahih on a traditional paradigm. That doesn't matter for a secular scholar, nor does mutawatirness. But the point is, this hadith has already been analyzed by Yunbal, and Yunbal says that it can be traced back to the level of Ibn Jurayj or Sufyan al-Thawri. So it is not, it doesn't go back to the Prophet, and it's not mutawatir, because you have from there, I mean, the most you can say it goes back to Abu az-Zubair. But from there, it goes back single-stranded to the Prophet. So it is not mutawatir at all, because it's single-stranded in the initial chains of transmission. So this is, again, this hadith does not help you whatsoever. We're 7 slides down, and you're not doing any better. Okay, and you can look at the analysis by Yunbal there if you'd like. Now we can go to slide number 8. Slide number 8 and slide number 9 are totally different hadiths. So how can these help you with the claim of mutawatir? They absolutely cannot. And slide number 8 shows you the back projecting process, because you have Umar who's saying something and it's not going back to the Prophet. Okay. All right. So slide number 8, 8 and 9 are completely different hadiths. So we're now all the way to slide number 10. So far, he has not really made a good case whatsoever. Now, slide number 10 actually does go back to the Prophet. This, you can just, again, refer back to the analysis by Yunbal. This, again, is single-stranded, going back to the Prophet from at least Abu az-Zubair. From Abu az-Zubair. So it does not at all prove the mutawatir claim at all. So that's slide number 10. As far as slide number 11, now this is a red herring. He's just throwing in a red herring. It's totally irrelevant to this discussion. We're talking about a hadith that was supposedly said, at the deathbed pronouncements. Now he's talking about Banu Qurayza. And I already did mention about whether or not, in my initial response, I did mention whether or not certain Jews may have been expelled or not. Banu Qurayza is a completely different topic. So this is a red herring, and we could talk about that later. Juan Coley does discuss this if you're interested. So that, again, is an irrelevant red herring. Slide 12 is, slide 12, he just kind of slapped this together. Slide 12, we have 3 different hadith, I think he quoted. This one is from Sunan Abu Dawud. This one is completely irrelevant to the discussion. It has nothing to do with the hadith in question. The second one is also from Sunan Abu Dawud. This is, again, it says it right here. It's mawquf. And it's not only that, it's a broken chain. So this does not help you with a claim of mutawatir at all. And then the third one, this is from the Muwatta, and again this is also a broken chain. So it's missing at least one or two links. Again, makes no claim, it does not help you at all in your claim of being mutawatir. So now we are 12 slides in, and he has not backed his claim about this hadith being mutawatir. So slide 13 is, he's claiming that I have a red herring, but I don't have a red herring. This is a red herring in reality itself. I mentioned that if we're going to take the traditionalist perspective, then we should do justice to it and say that they restrict it to a very limited area, usually the environs of Mecca and Medina, the Hejaz, or at most the Arabian Peninsula. But really, the fact is that the point I was trying to make is that traditionalists in general are not trying to actively use these hadiths to expel or ethnically cleanse anything. That was the point I was trying to make, but it's not relevant to our discussion about whether or not the Prophet actually did something or not, which my argument was based on secular scholarship primarily. So this is, again, irrelevant discussion in slide number 13. Slide number 14 is also irrelevant. It's talking about, again, he mentions it. It's mentioning about polytheists. This is another discussion altogether. I'm more than happy to have this about you, but it does not help you at all about the initial hadith, which is about expelling Jews and Christians, and whether or not, you made this initial claim about it being mutawatir, doesn't help you for that at all. So again, more irrelevant stuff. He's just all he's trying to do, Gondal, is just trying to spam his audience with a bunch of reports to kind of say, look, it's all of these. This is all that I have. And I think he's himself confused. And so this is the result of it. It's very unclear and muddled thinking, in my opinion. Okay. Slide 15, more irrelevant points. He's now just stating the obvious point that I don't contest, that conservative traditionalist scholars will say still, and he just quotes a fatwa here, that non-Muslims cannot enter or cannot reside in Mecca and Medina, in the Hijaz, basically. I don't contest that, and that has no relevance to the discussion. So now we are 15 slides in, and again, he has not backed up his claim. 16, now he's just plugging his own material, which is fine. You can do that. But again, it has no relevance to his initial claim. So this 16 is also irrelevance. 17 is where he's now making, he's defending his comparisons to Nazism and ISIS. No. Not all of Islam is Nazism or ISIS, but there's still a connection there. Come on, dude, stop it. And then slide 18. Slide 18, I think, is worthy of responding to. Basically, he's just trying to make an emotional claim. So he's fallen on his face when it comes to factual claims. So now he's trying to make an emotional appeal. And his emotional appeal is that he just spammed you with a bunch of reports. And now he's trying to say, look, there are all of these above Islamic references and multiple narrations, but you're claiming that they're completely fake. Well, I already pointed you in the direction of one article. I can point you in the direction of other articles. Secular scholars do believe that hadiths were mass produced. Now, there was a gradual process for that. They were done for, this process was done for multiple reasons: theological, legal, sectarian, political. But in general, secular scholars are hesitant to use hadith to tell us about what the Prophet said. Or instead, we take the Quran as what the Prophet said. Now, because it came out of his mouth, it came out from his tongue, and it ultimately came from his mind. Now, of course, Muslims would believe that the prophet was divinely inspired from God, and that this inspiration or revelation took place either in his heart or his mind. Really, we take it as his heart. But this is the point is that for secular scholars, they would take the Quran as the source. Not all of these hadiths and even the seerah literature would be very cautious and skeptical about. Now, this is a secular approach. This is what our debate was about. I don't want to be disrespectful to traditionalists and the traditionalist paradigm. It's based on different premises. It's based ultimately on religious premises. The problem is with the early period of Islam, and the way the gap is bridged by traditionalists is based on religious premises that are really unfalsifiable, which is based on the idea of the rectitude of the companions, and also then on a generation that is said to have lived very long time. So you had a generation, and that's in order to fill that gap, that you had people who were like lived 100 years old. These are religious premises, and it's based on the understanding that God would not allow his message through the prophet to be lost. And so we need to be respectful towards this. And I don't want to dismiss it completely, but these are religious premises. If you're going to take the traditionalist route, which is what Gondal is going to do, he's going to switch and say, well, most people believe this, then you have to be fair to the traditionalist paradigm and also see what else they say about these kind of things. And that is relevant to, for example, when we talk about certain punishments. This is a different debate I was having, but you have to look at what they say, how they mitigate these reports. Anyways, I'm rambling a little bit, so I'll just stop here. But the point is, let's just summarize. The summary is that he had 18 different posts to back up his claim that these are mutawatir. None of the 18 prove that it's mutawatir. Only, I think, 2 of the slides even had the same hadith, and those hadiths are single-stranded to at least Abu az-Zubair, and none of them back up his claim of it being mutawatir. And the saddest thing is that this claim of being mutawatir has no relevance to the argument that I made against him. So really, this is kind of a poor job, and I think he knows it. And I really wish that Gondal would be a little bit more honest, so that we can have more meaningful conversations back and forth. I think he has the capability. He's not a dumb guy. He's he's obviously he has something that he could potentially contribute. But in order for us to have this kind of discourse, I expect a certain level of intellectual honestness, and that's okay to say, you know what? Yeah, what you said makes sense. You got me here. I mean, that's how these discussions should go. You shouldn't just feel compelled to churn something out, to please your followers. Let's have a meaningful discussion. Okay, I'm rambling a lot, so I'm going to end it here. Thank you very much. The bottom line, again, is that from a secular scholarly perspective, the idea that the prophet issued a command to expel all the Jews and the Christians from Arabia is very tenuous. We should be very skeptical of this claim, and it probably almost certainly did not happen, as Munt says in his article. Thank you.